be seated. Court is now in session.
The court will now hear the IMT v. Chirac case, beginning with a statement from the prosecution, followed by remarks from the defense team, including a statement from Mr. Chirac himself.
We will now hear the prosecution's opening statements. Please approach the stand.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen of the court. Greeting, justices, and I wish you all a happy Hanukkah. I am here to explain to you why the defendant, Boulder von Chirac, is unequivocally guilty of crimes against humanity, conspiracy, and war crimes. Boulder von Chirac is responsible for brainwashing every youth in Germany with anti-Semitic Nazi ideas. He was the leader of Nazi-occupied Vienna and a slavish follower of Hitler and the Nazi Party ideas. Chirac is guilty on the counts of conspiracy, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Chirac held many high-level ranking positions in the Nazi Party. He joined the party in 1925 at just 18 years old and steadily climbed the ranks until 1945. He was deeply involved in the party's ideologies and played a key role in many party policies and decisions. His biggest role, however, was as leader of the Hitler Youth. As the leader of the Hitler Youth, Chirac was responsible for brainwashing all members to swear complete allegiance to Hitler and all the Nazi Party ideas through the use of extensive propaganda. He was responsible for training the Hitler Youth in military tactics, as well as physically preparing them to join the military through the training and preparation of war. He created the Streitenfass program to train members of the Hitler Youth to join the SS. In this program, he brainwashed all members' young minds with anti-Semitic ideas and prepared them for the military. Chirac's goal when creating the Hitler Youth was to completely ingrain the Nazi Party ideas and beliefs of superiority within the minds of the youngest German generation. He himself said this in his book, Revolution of Education, page 631, evidence number 2306-PS, quote, "I am responsible to the right that the entire youth of Germany will be educated physically, morally, and spiritually in the spirit of the National Socialist idea of state," end quote. He started work on completing his goal by first absorbing all other after-school youth programs into the Hitler Youth. By doing this, he eliminated any opportunity the German youth had to be exposed to ideas and principles outside of those the Nazi Party wanted them to see. His next step was making membership of the Hitler Youth compulsory for all German youth. Through the isolation of German youth from non-Nazi ideas, Chirac ensured that every child in Germany would be exposed to Nazi ideas. These steps allowed him to begin his process of brainwashing. Chirac was responsible for the founding of Hitler schools. These were educational establishments created for the sole purpose of indoctrinating German youth into the Nazi Party through the cult-like teachings of Nazi ideas and propaganda. Extensive military training and physical education was a part of the course structure as well as Nazi ideals. These schools allowed for complete control over every form of education the German youth would receive and allowed the indoctrination to start as young as at 6 months old through the founding of Hitler preschools. The Hitler Youth members were fed exclusively Nazi propaganda from a young and impressionable age, which caused them to grow up surrounded by the party's ideas and to absorb them. As a result, the members of the Hitler Youth treated Hitler as if he were their god, and every piece of Nazi propaganda, literature, and instruction as their dogma. Chirac and the Hitler Youth are responsible for completely brainwashing an entire generation of German youth to become slaves of the Nazi Party, Nazi Germany, and Hitler. There was a large focus on preparation for the military in the Hitler Youth. The members participated in shooting practice, war games, endurance and strength training, military strategy, and much more. There were special branches of the Hitler Youth dedicated to training the members for specific military branches and positions. All of this training was to make sure that every member of the Hitler Youth who joined the military, and once the draft was introduced, every member who had been drafted, was a ready and capable soldier in the German army. The soldiers who came from the Hitler Youth were ready to lay down their lives for the Nazi Party's ideas and for Hitler. The extensive military training mixed with the propaganda the members of the Hitler Youth were fed led to a group of people who were so dedicated to the Nazi Party's harmful anti-Semitic ideas that they would not hesitate to die defending them. The Streitenfass program was a special branch of the Hitler Youth dedicated to preparing its members to join the SS. The officers and death heads of the SS would be picked directly from this program as laid out in the Handbook of Collected Youth Laws, evidence number 2369-PS, which states that not only should general SS members be chosen from the Streitenfass, but, quote, recruits for the special SS troops, for SS death head troops, and for the officer candidate schools should be taken from these formations, end quote. Schirach is responsible for laying the framework of anti-Semitism in future members of the SS through their time in the Streitenfass program. The Hitler Youth poisoned the minds of its members through propaganda promoting Nazi Party ideas. A large aspect of this was teaching the members that Jews were destroying European culture. Because of the young age, the Streitenfass members were taught this, as well as the fact that they had been completely isolated from all non-Nazi ideals. The Streitenfass members absorbed all harmful Nazi propaganda they were taught. When the members grew up and joined the SS, they had a place to act on their anti-Semitic thoughts. Schirach brainwashed the members of the Hitler Youth into believing harmful Nazi Party ideas through the use of anti-Semitic Aryan propaganda. They were trained to become ruthless soldiers who would not hesitate to lay down their lives for the Nazi Party's harmful ideas or for Hitler himself. Schirach was responsible for training future members of the SS through the Streitenfass program and implementing harmful Nazi Party ideas in their heads at a young age. Schirach's harmful teachings left a scar in the minds of an entire generation of Germans. Schirach held military party and governmental control over Nazi-occupied Vienna. During this time, he was in close contact with members of the SS and SA to ensure that everything in Vienna was running smoothly. While having control of Vienna, he began the process of ghettoization. The act of sectioning off Jews and treating them inferior through ghettoization shows Schirach's harmful ideas of anti-Semitism. Schirach played a key role in supplying the slave labor program with human labor. He took 60,000 Jewish citizens from Vienna and forced them to work in German factories. These citizens were taken against their will from their homes and taken far away to work in factories in Germany, creating weapons for German use in the war. Schirach was acutely aware of what the Jews he was sending away would be forced to do and the gruesome fates that would befall them once they ended up in the camps. During the process of the liquidation of the Vienna ghetto, the members of the ghetto were sent to forced labor in concentration camps. Because Schirach was in charge of Vienna, and by extension its ghetto, he was responsible for sending its inhabitants to the camp. Schirach expressed many harmful anti-Semitic ideas about Jews. In a speech he made in front of the European Youth Conference, evidence number 3048-PS, he stated, quote, "Every Jew who exerts influence in Europe is a danger to European culture," end quote. Schirach was aware of the fate of the Jews who were deported and sent to the camps. He has visited the camps and was even present during the receiving of an order stating that Jews were to be marched from one camp to another to avoid liberation. In conclusion, through Schirach's time in the Nazi Party, he was responsible for brainwashing an entire generation of German youths through the use of propaganda promoting harmful Nazi ideas. He was responsible for training the Hitler Youth to join the military, making sure that all soldiers would lay down their lives for the Nazi Party with no hesitation. He was responsible for prepping the members of the SS to become officers and death heads, as well as laying the framework of anti-Semitism in their minds at a young age. He sent 60,000 Jews as forced labor to work in German factories creating weapons, as well as being acutely aware of what would happen to the Jews who were sent to the camps. Thank you.
We will now hear the defense's opening statement on behalf of Mr. Schirach. Please approach the stand.
Ladies and gentlemen, justices, my name is Mackenzie Humphrey and I'm defending Boulder von Schirach. We are here today because the International Military Tribunal is charging Boulder von Schirach on counts of conspiracy, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. This is a case of a man who was dedicated to inspiring and leading the youth of Germany to become effective members of their community, nothing more. The case of a man who responsibly fulfilled his tasks as Gaultier of Vienna. The case of a man whose actions spoke louder than his words. On June 1st, 1933, Schirach was appointed the Reich Youth Leader, a position where he was entrusted to lead the youth of Germany. Schirach's central responsibility as youth leader was to unite the youth through doctrines of enthusiasm, discipline, and order. And this he did. Now, the prosecution will attempt to make you believe that Schirach was a man whose main agenda was to indoctrinate and brainwash the minds of the German youth, then fill them with Nazi ideologies. A man who only cared about using the youth to incite violence and not about them individually. Evidence will show that Schirach tried his hardest not only to inspire the youth, but to empower them. He presented the youth with exceptional opportunities and encouraged them to become leaders in their community. Every year, the Hitler Youth was educated following a specific theme, ranging from 1933, Schirach's first year as Reich Youth Leader, to his last in 1940. The themes consisted of, as cited in document Schirach 4, unity, education, physical fitness, young people, home building, understanding, health training, and rehabilitation. Simply, these themes were taught to inspire the youth to become better physically and morally. These annual themes did not consist of any dogma or propaganda that could influence the minds of the Hitler Youth members. Schirach did not have the power to manipulate the thought or action of 8 million German children against their desire, will, or without their knowledge. Nor did he want to. Schirach genuinely only had the youth's best interests in mind. And through the action of creating annual themes that would solely assist the youth in becoming positive members of their community, he confirms that. Furthermore, through exchanges and summits, Schirach, as stated in document Schirach 3, constantly advised the members of the Hitler Youth to establish close relations with the youth of other nations. Schirach knew, and I quote, that understanding among the youth of the world would guarantee that there would never be another war. If Schirach truly wanted the youth to follow Nazi ideology and only incite violence, why did he feel the need to connect them with the youth of different nations to prevent conflict? His actions are speaking. As it pertains to war crimes, Schirach is responsible for showing the German youth professional opportunities that suited their interests, but also served their communities. Firstly, it is imperative that I state Schirach was not fond of the military presence within the Hitler Youth and was, as cited in document Schirach 122, strongly opposed to any soldier playing within the organization. Moreover, while in Dresden, Schirach was informed, much to his dismay, a decree had been made by Hitler ensuring that the 2 oldest age groups of the Hitler Youth would receive, as cited in document Schirach 132, pre-military training. Young men in the Hitler Youth who showed interest in the military field and seemed suitable for the position were given the opportunity to serve through the Streifenpost. As cited in document 2398 PS, it was exclusively the task of the young men enrolled in a pre-military organization to attend the training of their unit. Although young men within the Hitler Youth were encouraged to participate, it was not mandatory. Thus, members of the Hitler Youth chose to join the Streifenpost on their own autonomy. All actions and crimes committed by former members of the Hitler Youth and Streifenpost who went on to join a military organization have no connection to Schirach. The Streifenpost program was created to recruit promising members of the Hitler Youth who had shown interest and capability in the field of militia. Young men from the Hitler Youth who went on to become SS officers made decisions within their profession without a lesson they were taught years ago in an after-school program affecting their conduct. As it pertains to crimes against humanity, Baldur von Schirach responsibly served Vienna as Gaultier with understanding and compassion. Schirach was commanded to, as cited in 1950 PS, to take cognizance of the deportation of the Jews from Vienna to Poland through a letter sent by Dr. Lammers. In the letter, Lammers wrote 60,000 Viennese Jews living in Reichsgau, Vienna would be deported because of an, and I quote, housing shortage based on the Führer's decision. Chirac was unaware, however, that once Jews were deported from Vienna, they were going to be sent to concentration camps and killed. Perversely, there was nothing Chirac could have done to prevent the Jews from being deported. An attempt to seize the deportation would not only put his life in danger, but the life of his loved ones as well. Chirac was on thin ice following an incident involving his wife, Henriette, and Hitler, in which she confronted him about the treatment of Jews being deported from Amsterdam. Hitler erupted and had an outburst, as cited in Chirac 3, which terrified her. The Chiracs were urgently told by Adjutant Schaub, a close confidant of Hitler's, to leave as soon as possible because they were under the risk of getting sent to, and I quote, a concentration camp. Chirac, as cited in document Chirac 3, had new bodyguards assigned to himself without affiliation to the SS as a safety precaution and never spoke directly to Hitler again. Chirac's views caused contention among some members of the Nazi Party, but that did not stop him from engaging with people of various beliefs while acknowledging, accepting, and trying to reduce discrimination based on the differences between them. While completing his responsibilities as Voltaire, Chirac made considerations with a moderating influence on implementations concerning orders against the continued, as stated in Chirac 3, employment of Jews in theater, employment of Jews in various businesses, and orders about the wearing of the Star of David. Chirac regularly intervened on behalf of Jewish individuals, specifically, as stated in Chirac 3, two female gardeners who were half Jews, the son of composer Dr. Richard Strauss, so that he and his Jewish wife could remain in their home, the Jewish wife of Viennese actor Hans Moser, and two dancers in the Viennese opera. Now, we've all said things we regret. I know I have. Imagine discovering what you said was harmful and cruel, accepting responsibility, and attempting to become better. Now imagine every harmful comment you've ever said being used against you when you're simply not that person anymore. Through his actions, Baldur von Schirach evolved. He realized the errors in his ways and attempted to repair them by helping those he hurt the most. But Baldur von Schirach isn't on trial for the things he said. He is on trial because of his actions. And I can assure you, Baldur von Schirach most definitely isn't on trial for the actions of others. Thus, members of the Hitler Youth chose to apply the doctrines of the organization to their own lives and chose to develop ideologies based on certain doctrines on their own accord. It was simply impossible for Chirac to brainwash 8 million young men with their own personal beliefs and demand they discriminate against Jewish individuals. If a young man who was part of the Hitler Youth believed such a thing, it was developed through their own autonomy. Members of the Hitler Youth who went on to join the military decided how to act on combat based on their own personal beliefs. In conclusion, Baldur von Schirach is a man who was dedicated to inspiring and leading the youth of Germany to become effective members of their community, nothing more. Now, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Baldur von Schirach is guilty. They won't be able to because his actions speak loud. His actions, which are ones of understanding, compassion, and consideration. I'm going to be asking you to find Baldur von Schirach not guilty, and I believe that based on the evidence I share today, that is possible. Thank you.
We will now hear from the defendant himself, Mr. Schirach.
Greetings, justices, prosecution, and defense. My name is Baldur Benedict von Schirach, and I plead not guilty to the charges of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and conspiracy. I was born to a simple family who lived in Berlin, Germany. My father was a World War I veteran, serving under the German Republic at the time. I looked up to him as a figure of bravery and respect for serving our country in the tough events of World War I. My mother, Emma Middleton Tillou, was an American by blood and had deep roots of ancestors who served in the Civil War and were signatures of the U.S. Constitution. Being half German and American, my childhood was often mixed between both nationalities. By the age of 10, I ended up leaning towards my German side and joined the military cadet group. Since joining the cadet group, I became very interested in the military and and in many political ideologies. At a young age, I read Hitler's Mein Kampf. Hitler's message of struggle and then freedom allowed me to connect it to the German people and how our current struggle under the Treaty of Versailles could be freed by the Nazi Party. Once I was in college in 1929, I joined the National Socialist Student League and became an active and popular member. Then, when the present leader stepped down from his position, I was elected by my peers as the new leader of the NSSL. My new role as the leader of the NSSL brought the attention of the very Nazi Party leader himself, Adolf Hitler. In 1931, Hitler invited me to his office, and he decided that I would be the next and future leader, next and future Reichsjuth leader of the Nazi Party. As the newly appointed Reichsjuth leader, I now had control of the Hitler Youth. During the early stages of my appointment as Reichsjuth leader, the Hitler Youth had a significant following and funding backed up by voluntary donations and admissions. This led to a high demand from the public to expand its regiments and further evolve the youth organization. Furthermore, the Hitler Youth was a legal movement like the hundreds of other youth organizations around the world. It offered a way to train youth in survival camping and many interesting activities centered to inspire the young mind. In fact, there were many other youth organizations, such as the Respectable Boy Scouts, that featured similar, if not the same activities as the Hitler Youth. In the end, the Hitler Youth was a completely legal way of inspiring and engaging youth in activities that they enjoyed. With this similar mentality, I personally believe that all youth should participate in the Hitler Youth, as it was beneficial and inspiring them. I personally wanted the youth to take the lessons that they learned from the Hitler Youth and inspire themselves to become the future leaders of their communities, allowing them to become the prosperous future of Germany. With my goals for the youth in mind, with a combined effort with Mr. Robert Lay, we created the Hitler Youth Schools. It provided a great way for many youths to engage in active leadership roles and gave them essential education for their futures. I left the project in its early stages to Robert Lay, and in fact, he carried on the development of the completely legal schools for the rest of the war. My time as Gaultier of Vienna was in a total blur and not in my complete control. At my time as a Gaultier in 1940, I was subjected to the matter of the deportation of the Jews. The deportation of the Jews was a difficult subject to decide on, as I believe that the Jews should be transported to a separate area of Vienna, but still remaining in Austria. Hitler demanded they were to be deported, and the responsibility of the Viennese Jews was to be transferred to the general government. After our meeting, the responsibility of the Jewish population went to the general government, which then deported the Jews to Poland. I was not informed of their deportation until much later, and the reasoning was that they were deported because of a housing shortage sent directly from Hitler. After the dispute between Hitler and I lost much of my faith in him. I relooked on his decision and decided from there on I would dedicate the rest of my Nazi career to acting against Jewish mistreatment. In 1943, I learned to stop Jewish maltreatment in the Reichstag of Vienna via multiple protests. With the protests, I lost a significant trust and popularity from my coworkers in the Nazi Party. Even after the protests in 1943, I strictly felt that the Jews should have never been executed, but rather should be sent to separate colonies to live by themselves, which I openly exclaimed to the people of Vienna and Austria. In conclusion, throughout the war, I changed and shifted my views on the Jewish population, but my ultimate goal in reviving the German nation remained.
We will now begin direct examination. Defense, we will begin on your behalf.
What was your main goal while fulfilling the position of Reich Youth Leader?
My main goal was to inspire youth and teach them that they could become the next future leaders of the German nation.
Why did you create annual themes for the Hitler Youth?
I felt like the annual themes allowed the youth to focus on a certain criteria and for them to sort of refine the morals on said theme. None of the themes were locally sort of generalized on Nazi propaganda, and more were just like activities done day to day, like physical activities, leadership, and overall, yeah. And then,
Okay.
yeah.
Why did you want the German youth to connect with the youth of other nations?
I felt like it was important for the Hitler Youth to connect with other youths of other nations because it provided them to identify different individual identities and create a sort of bond with other countries so that, again, no future wars can happen and more peace can be around Europe.
How did you feel about the military presence within the Hitler Youth?
I felt the pre-military training was always a set in stone thing in the Hitler Youth, and there were rifle training as a standard in the Hitler Youth. I was once approached by the SA that they wanted to have more military influence into the Hitler Youth, but I declined the offer and said that the Hitler Youth was more of a youth organization and shouldn't be extremely dependent on developing the soldiers.
How did you discover Viennese Jews were being deported?
I discovered from a message that said in the statement that there was a housing shortage, and initially me and Hitler had a meeting, and he discussed that he wanted a deportation of the Jews, but I discussed that I wanted them to be moved to a separate area of Vienna, and I wasn't really contacted after when I gave the responsibility of the Jews to the general government, and yeah.
Why did you distance yourself from the Nazi Party?
I distanced myself from the Nazi Party because of overall conflicts between me and Hitler. I felt like he wasn't adopting a ton of my ideas and transporting the Jews into localized areas in Vienna and Austria. Overall, the initial conflict in 1940 between the deportation of the Jews sort of left me questioning about Jewish treatment, and so I leaned toward helping the Jews and fixing their sort of mistreatment throughout the war.
Following that question, what happened in the spring of 1943 involving your wife, Henriette Schirach, and Hitler?
My wife spotted 100 Jewish women being deported from Austria, and she spotted them outside the window of her room, and she wanted to do something about it. So she confronted Hitler, and I suggested that she had to confront Hitler and talk about it. And she confronted Hitler and just overall discussed about the Jewish mistreatment, and Hitler had an outburst and sort of just kicked us out. And and I was quite worried. Some of my fellow Nazi Party members told me that I might get sent to a concentration camp, and so I dismissed many of my bodyguards and hired private ones in fear that the Hitler that was now not really in my favor at all would send me to a concentration camp.
No further questions.
We will now begin cross-examination. Prosecution, we will begin on your behalf.
Mr. Schirach, in evidence number 3302-PS, you state in your affidavit that, quote, the office of Reich Youth Leader was personally united in me with the superior office of Reich Leader. It was my task to educate the youth in the aims, ideology, and directives of the NSDAP, and beyond this, to direct them and shape them, end quote. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
And would you mind reading this highlighted section from the book you wrote yourself, Education?
I am responsible to the Reich that the entire youth of Germany will be educated physically, morally, and spiritually in the spirit of the National Socialist idea of the state.
That is evidence number 2306. Can you confirm that you did in fact write this?
Yes.
Mr. Schirach, was membership in the Hitler Youth compulsory for all German youth?
It was until a much later time. Initially, after Hitler started to take over the government, it wasn't, but over a sense of time, I felt that it was a necessity that most youth involvement sort of a youth program, and so I made it compulsory much later.
So all in all, membership in the Hitler Youth was compulsory for all German youth?
Yes.
Evidence number 2229 states that the Reich Committee of German Youth Associations is dissolved herewith. The previous task of the Reich Committee will be taken over in the expanded sphere of tasks of the youth leadership of the German Reich, end quote. If I'm not mistaken, This document says that all youth programs will now be headed and or dissolved into the Hitler Youth. Yes or no?
Yes, yeah, that happened.
And is it true that the members of the Hitler Youth were given a large amount of propaganda promoting pro-Nazi ideas, as seen in the list of educational material given to the Hitler Youth members, evidence number 3349-PS? Yes or no?
Yes, but to the extent of the teachers and also the education, so the Hitler education was sort of the main factor.
But they were given Nazi propaganda.
Yes.
Evidence number 2441-PS mentions an act of having youth members swear an oath to Hitler that goes as follows. In the presence of this blood flag, which represents our Führer, I swear to devote all my energies, all my strength to the savior of our country, Adolf Hitler. I am willing and ready to give up my life for him, so help me God. One people, one nation, one Führer. Would you consider swearing an oath like this in the presence of a blood flag to be a normal youth activity? Yes or no?
No.
Based on your responses to these previous questions, sir, the court can infer that you, as the Hitler Youth leader, had all citizens of the Reich had all German citizens of the Reich join the Hitler Youth Organization, where they were then taught, not by choice as they were forced to join, ideas and propaganda of the Nazi Party. Yes or no?
Yes.
From evidence number 2441-PS, quote, they say we were making the boys into soldiers. Do we deny it? Certainly not. End quote. This quote was said by an officer of the Hitler Youth. Do you deny a direct statement saying that the members of the Hitler Youth were being made into soldiers? Yes or no? You do not deny, or you do?
I do not deny.
Evidence number 2654-PS contains a large list of special branches of the Hitler Youth, which were dedicated to training the members for the military, and this article also contains numerous entries detailing military-style games and activities. This information leads me to believe that the Hitler Youth trains its members for joining the military through the use of war games and things like that. Would that be correct? Yes or no?
Yes, they were simple games and not very rigorous current military sort of procedures and training.
In regards to the specific training branch of the Hitler Youth called the Streitbus program, evidence number 2396-PS says it is organized as a special unit for the purpose of securing recruits for the General SS. However, as much as possible, recruits for the SS Special Troops, for the SS Death Head Troops, and for the officer candidate schools should be taken from these formations. So, is it true that both General SS members and SS officers are chosen directly from the Streitbus program? Yes or no?
Yes.
And is it also true that these Streitbus members received the same military training and propaganda-filled education, if not more, as the other members of the Hitler Youth? Yes or no?
Yes, because it was their choice to sort of extend their sort of education on them.
But they did receive propaganda and military training?
Yes.
Mr. Sirach, in evidence number 1950, it details a letter in which was written to you that said, quote, the Fuhrer has decided, after one of the reports made by you, that 60,000 Jews still residing in Reichstag, Vienna will be deported most rapidly. Do you recall receiving this letter that explicitly states that, thanks to you, Jews will be deported from Vienna? Yes or no?
Yes, but in a different manner. I recall in a different way.
In evidence number 3870, it is said that in your presence, Hans Marsekel received a direct order from Heydrich Himmler that over 60,000 Jews who had been working as slave labor would be transferred to Munasser concentration camp by death march once their work as slave labor was complete. Can you confirm this? Yes or no?
I do not remember that.
Prosecutor, your time is up. The court would like to make a quick note that if you are not a defendant, a justice, or an attorney, that all gestures and opinions shall be kept to yourself. This is a warning.
Okay, we will move on to the tribunal questioning. The tribunal will now ask the following questions. Prosecution, may you please approach the stand? We have a clarifying question. Is there any other evidence besides document 1950 to support your contention that Schirach had a role in the deportation of the Jews?
Yes, there was also a phone call detailing him being aware of this deportation of Jews. If you give me a minute, I can pull it up and
Yeah, of
find the
course.
evidence number. This is evidence number 1948-PS.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Schirach, we are trying to understand the relationship between the Hitler Youth and the SS. The Streifenbus program had aligned itself with the SS in 1938. What was the connection between the two?
Sort of a build up from the Streifenbus was sort of a build up to the SS, sort of just like a Hitler. It was like a Hitler Youth program that was by choice you could join, and it built up to the SS program as a sort of training, and then they were elected or selected if they had the ability to join the SS based on their, and yeah, it was all sort of a choice to join it. It was never forced upon in any way in the Hitler Youth to join the Streifenbus.
Prosecution used Article 2441 to prove Hitler Youth had weapons training. What was the purpose and intent of having weapons training for young German boys?
Weapons training mostly taught around the world, I felt. It was an average sort of thing done across all countries, in children. The intent really was to just familiarize with low bore caliber rifles. It wasn't to the extent where it went into higher class rifles that were used in the military. It was just to familiarize themselves with weapons, with self-defense, and in further cases, if they ever wanted to join the SA or the military, that they could use those, have a sort of basis knowledge of using weapons.
As Gauleiter of Vienna, what exactly was your duty?
My duty was to confirm sort of the overall basis of Vienna. I was responsible of the Jewish public in sort of notifying each Gau and my higher ups how many Jews were located, just control the sort of area as a sort of governor. And yeah.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Schirach, based on document 1950, Dr. Lamer sent you a letter informing you that Hitler deported 60,000 Jews from Vienna because of a housing shortage. Were you aware of this happening prior to the letter was sent out? And if so, what role did you have in the slave labor process as Gauleiter of Vienna?
So that's the first question. I was informed with my meeting between Hitler. He sort of just focused on deportation, and I never really know where they went, but I did receive that message. Sorry, and yeah. And then for the second question, the slave labor, I was sort of notifying Dr. Salter, I think his name, on the Jewish public, and he really took control of, he had the whole sort of regiment plan of the slave labor, and I was really just like sort of the middleman, if I say, to sort of communicate to him on slave labor. What wasn't really my entire responsibility of the slave labor.
Thank you. We will now hear prosecution's closing statement. Please approach the stand.
The defense claims that Schirach gave Germany's youth exciting new activities. Do you justices consider becoming a member of the SS, where murder was a daily task and exciting activity for German youth? The defense also claims that Schirach wanted to prevent war by having Hitler Youth members meet with children all around the world. However, at the same time, he directly prepared its members for the military. By preparing an entire generation to become members of the military, he was clearly expanding Germany's army for use in the upcoming war. This includes violating peace. This was not just an after-school program. It was a required program for all children in Germany. It was not a karate class or an art class, but a military and SS training program where children were trained from birth to hate Jews and other persecuted groups in Germany. In his preschool programs, he taught children to hate Jews the same way Jews the same way the SS were learning to hate Jews. Schirach held no care in his heart for Jews in Vienna. Schirach himself said that tens of thousands of Jews upon tens of thousands of Jews sent tens of thousands upon Jews into the ghetto in Vienna. He feels himself compelled to reply that, quote, "I see this as an action contributing to European culture." Evidence 3048. He placed Jewish citizens in the ghetto in Vienna as an act of hate, as well as actively seeking out Jews to be sent off for use in the slave labor program. He also said in a speech, "Every Jew who exerts influence in Europe is a danger to European culture." This quote further proves his hatred for the Jewish people. The defense claims that Schirach acted in kindness and compassion, but is placing Jews in cramped, dirty ghettos an act of compassion? Is preparing children to become murderers in act of compassion for the future? He is clearly advancing the Nazi agenda with no true care for these children's futures. Schirach claims that the Boy Scouts were similar to the SS. The Boy Scouts did not brainwash children with Nazi propaganda into becoming murderous soldiers. The Boy Scouts did not force its members to swear a complete allegiance and oath to the President of the United States. Schirach may have been inspiring the youth, but he was clearly inspiring them to become future murderers and ruthless, brutal leaders. This is not compassionate members of society. Schirach should be found guilty on the acts of conspiracy for his actions in brainwashing the Hitler Youth, war crimes, and his training of Hitler Youth members to become SS soldiers, and crimes against humanity for his knowledge of the camps and participation in the slave labor program. Thank you.
We will now hear defense's closing statement. Please approach the stand.
Baldur von Schirach is not guilty. As I've said, he is a man who was dedicated to inspiring and leading the youth of Germany to become effective members of their community. He is a man who served responsibly as Guiltier of Vienna. He is a man who tried his hardest to repair his wrongdoings. He is a man whose actions spoke volumes. He is a man whose actions spoke louder than his words. Now, prosecution has attempted to make you believe Baldur von Schirach is a power-hungry, evil anti-Semite who wanted the youth of Germany to incite violence and discriminate against Jewish individuals. In actuality, and supported by the evidence, it is sufficient to say that Baldur von Schirach was committed to empowering the youth to become better for their communities and was dedicated to assisting the Viennese people as Guiltier. As I have said, the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Baldur von Schirach is guilty. I'm asking the justices to think about the charges today and determine if they apply to the defendant. I'm asking the judges to think fully about the defendant's actions and decide if he is guilty. I believe with the evidence I've shown today, Baldur von Schirach's actions speak louder than the charges and the claims of the prosecution. Thank you.
Panel 1 will now take time to deliberate on the evidence and statements just presented, while panel 2 here's the next case after a short break.
All right.